Hello, my name is Van Hing, and my question is, which country is going to be the economic superpower of the 21st century? So why is it important to find a good answer to this question? Well, I believe it is important to find a good answer because predicting the next economic superpower will allude to how the market is going to be in the future. A superpower country has the ability to project dominating power and influence anywhere in the world. Even people living in rural areas will feel the weight of influence the country has in their everyday life. It's important to know this in the professional world so that you know how to interpret the growth of a country's GDP and how to predict what country has the opportunity to become an economic superpower. It is also important to know this to make the world a better place so you understand why a country becomes a superpower and how this is important for the living standards of its citizens. To succeed in this class, it is important so you're prepared to compare and measure the economic growth of these different economies. My question is an economics question because it links into the economic power each country holds and if they qualify to become the next economic superpower. This means how much GDP and purchasing parity they have. It also looks into the rise in economic activity in different markets. Although there are many countries that lead in different areas of what is considered a superpower, China takes a spot when considering an economic superpower. I think China will be the economic superpower of the 21st century and overtake America's rank as number one. Even right now, they already hold so much influence and is quickly closing the gap. The best way to measure how strong a country is becoming is through GDP. The US nominal GDP for mid 2020 is 21.44 trillion USD, and for China, it is 14.14 trillion USD. We can see in this first graph that China is still behind America, but they are quickly making their way up. In fact, China is growing much quicker when comparing incremental GDP from 2006 to 2020. The US has an incremental growth of 7.629 trillion, while China has an 11.366 trillion. It is hypothesized that China's real GDP growth will slow down drastically in the coming future, but the government has decided to embrace this change and are taking it as an initiation to more private consumption, services, and innovations. Basically, China wants more real benefits, which would be good for their economy since they have done a lot of exporting. China's GDP is growing faster in a faster rate because they have more manpower. For example, let's say for one engineer in America, there are four more in China. But with this many people, they would need more to provide for them. If we look at the next graph, which is China versus America's GDP per capita, we can see that China is behind drastically, almost 40 years behind. Since China's GDP per capita is pretty low, that indicates that they are struggling to supply their citizens with their needs. As China's GDP is closing in on America's, who is currently the number one economy, their PPP, however, has already passed America's in 2014. In this first graph, we can see that currently China's PPP is 27.31 trillion USD, leading by 5.87 trillion, while the US is 21.44 trillion. If we take any PPP per capita in the second graph, the US again is in the lead. China's PPP per capita is about one third of the US. The limitations to answering this question is that models only work if nothing is changing. We know in real life nothing ever goes as planned, such as the coronavirus, which has sent many countries back years economically. In conclusion, we don't know what might happen in the future. We can only hypothesize. When talking about a recent unexpected event, we can look into COVID-19 and its effects on China. Since there was a major outbreak in China, their market had taken a hard hit and dipped lower than ever. However, because of China's strict stay-at-home orders and procedures, they have been able to return to normal. In fact, if we look at the top graph, we can see that China's economy grew 4.9% between July and September, becoming the first major economy to recover from the pandemic, while America is still struggling with lockdowns and bursts of outbreaks, halting the market. An assumption that would need to change for my answer to be incorrect is that China will keep growing in population, meaning there will be more working people in the future. If there is a sharp decline in population, then my answer may be incorrect, especially considering China's aging population and many of their youth leaving for education and a better life elsewhere. The long implementation of the one-child policy also doesn't help their fertility rate decline. However, I am hopeful that China's fertility will rise since it uplifted its one-child policy in 2015. Obviously, it will take a while for it to be implemented, but I'm sure it will soon be normalized after a couple years. Since its abolishment, China's fertility rate went from 1.64 children per woman in 2015 to 1.69 children per woman in 2020. This is not a huge difference, but at least there is some growth. And here are my sources.